Jesus and Zacchaeus. Chapter 19. Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. When Jesus came by, he looked up to Zacchaeus and called him by his name. "Zacchaeus," he said, "quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today." Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took a look at Jesus and took him to his house in great excitement and joy. But the people were displeased. "He has gone to be the guest at this notorious sinner," they grumbled. Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, "I will give half my wealth to the poor. Lord, if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much." Jesus responded, "Salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost." Parable of the 10 servants. The crowd was listening to everything Jesus said, and because he was nearing Jerusalem, he told them a story to correct the impression that the kingdom of God would begin right away. He said a nobleman was called away to a distant empire to be crowned king and then return. Before he left, he called together 10 of his servants and divided among them 10 pounds of silver, saying, "Invest this for me while I am gone." But his people hated him and sent a delegation after him to say, "We do not want him to be our king." After he was crowned king, he returned and called in the servants to whom he had given the money. He wanted to find out what their profits were. The first servant reported, "Master, I invested your money and made 10 times the original amount." "Well done," the king exclaimed. "You are a good servant. You have been faithful with the little I have entrusted you to, so you will be governor of 10 cities as your reward." The next servant reported, "Master, I invested your money and made 5 times the original amount." "Well done," the king said. "You will be governor over 5 cities." But the third servant brought back only the original amount of the money and said, "Master, I hid your money and kept it safe. I was afraid because you are a hard man to deal with, taking what isn't yours and harvesting crops you didn't plant." "You wicked servant," the king roared. "Your own words condemn you. If you knew that I am a hard man who takes what isn't mine and harvests crops I didn't plant, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it." Then turning to the others standing nearby, the king ordered, "Take the money from the servant and give it to the one who has 10 pounds. "But master," they said, "he already has 10 pounds. "Yes," the king replied, "to those who use well what they are given, even more will be given. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. And as these enemies of mine who didn't want me to be their king, bring them in and execute them right here in front of me." Before I continue, I can truly understand why they didn't want him to be king. Like, the guy just sounds like a horrible, greedy man. But that's just my opinion. Jesus' triumphant entry. After telling this story, Jesus went on toward Jerusalem, walking ahead of his disciples. As he came to the towns of Bethphage and Bethany on the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 disciples ahead. "Go into that village over there," he told them. "As you enter it, you will see a young donkey tied there with no one else to ride. No one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If everyone asks, 'Why are you untying that colt?' just say, 'The Lord needs it.'" So they went and found the colt, just as Jesus had said. And sure enough, as they were untying it, the owners asked them, "Why are you untying that colt?" And the disciples simply replied, "The Lord needs it." So they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their garments over it for him to ride on. As he rode along, the crowd spread out their garments on the road ahead of him. When he reached the place where the road started down the Mount of Olives, all of his followers began to shout and sing, as they walked along praising God for all the wonderful miracles that have been done. "Blessings to the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory to the highest heavens." But some of the Pharisees among the crowd said, "Teacher, rebuke your followers for saying things like that." He replied, "If they kept quiet, the stones along the road would burst into cheers." Jesus weeps over Jerusalem. But as he came closer to Jerusalem and saw the city ahead, he began to weep. "I wish today that you of all people would understand the way to peace. But now it is too late, and peace is hidden from your eyes. Before long your enemies will build ramparts against your walls and encircle you and close in on you from every side. They will crush you into the ground, and your children with you. Your enemies will not leave a single stone in place because you did not accept your opportunity for salvation. Jesus clears the temple. Then Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out the people selling animals for sacrifices. He said to them, "The scriptures declare my temple will be a house of prayer, but you have turned it into a den of thieves." After that he taught daily in the temple, but the leading priests, the teachers of religious law, and the other leaders of the people began planning how to kill him. But they could think of nothing, because all the people hung on every word he said. Now, that's the end of chapter 19, but I am going to say I'm surprised he didn't go all Old Testament in there, because selling animals for sacrifices in the temple, I thought they were against all that stuff. But then I kind of remind myself that everything was just completely still in the Old Testament days, right? So this is like a transitional period, which I always thought was actually quite interesting, to say the least. But it's just something that I always kind of thought was funny, that Jesus walks in there and he sees it. He sees all this stuff going on, right, in the temple, which is the house of God. You think he would just go like total berserk mode, like Hulk mode, and just like tear everything up. But no, he kept his cool pretty good. He wasn't like just going rampant all the time, which is actually pretty cool. Though I will say this, so I cannot wait to get to the part where he flips over the table because they're gambling. That's always been one of my favorite parts. I've heard about it almost. What was it? I heard about it in a few shows. I think it might have been like some kind of. I forget the name of the show. I think it was Everybody Loves Raymond. They made a reference to it. But anyways, chapter 20. The authority of Jesus is challenged. One day, as Jesus was teaching the people and preaching the good news in the temple, the leading priests, the teachers of religious law, and the elders came up to him. They demanded, "By what authority are you doing all these things? Who gave you the right?" "Let me ask you a question first," he replied. "Did John's authority to baptize come from heaven, or was it merely human?" They talked it over among themselves. "If we say it was from heaven, he will ask why we didn't believe John. But if we say it was merely human, the people will stone us because they are convinced John was a prophet." So they finally replied that they didn't know. And Jesus responded, "Then I won't tell you by what authority I do these things." Oh man, that's awesome. That's a pretty awesome thing. He painted them in a corner, and he was going in for the kill, but they play the "I don't know" card. That's actually pretty clever. Parable of the evil farmers. Now Jesus turned to the people again and told them this story. A man planted a vineyard, leased it to tenant farmers, and moved to another country to live for several years. At the time of the grape harvest, he sent one of his servants to collect his share of the crop. But the farmers attacked the servant, beat him up, and sent him back empty-handed. So the owner sent another servant, but they also insulted him, beat him up, and sent him away empty-handed. A third man was sent, and they wounded him and chased him away. "What will I do?" the owner asked. "I know. I'll send my cherished son. Surely they will respect him." But when the tenant farmers saw his son, they said to each other, "Here comes the heir of this estate. Let's kill him and get the estate for ourselves." So they dragged him out of the vineyard and murdered him. "What do you suppose the owner of the vineyard will do to them?" Jesus asked. "I'll tell you. He will come and kill those farmers and lease the vineyard to others." How terrible that such a thing should ever happen. His listeners protested. Jesus looked at them and said, "Then what does the scripture mean? The stone that the builders rejected has now become the cornerstone. Everyone who stumbles over that stone will be broken to pieces, and it will crush anyone if it falls on them." The teachers of religious law and the leading priests wanted to arrest Jesus immediately because they realized he was telling the story against them. They were the wicked farmers, but they were afraid of the people's reaction. That's actually quite clever. I do love that one, and it's the third time I read this parable, and it just keeps getting better and better in my opinion. Taxes for Caesar. Watching for their opportunity, the lenders sent spies pretending to be honest men. They tried to get Jesus to say something that could be reported to the Roman governor, so he could arrest Jesus. "Teacher," they said, "we know that you speak and teach that what is right, and you are not influenced by what others think. You teach the way of God truthfully. Now tell us, Is it right for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? He saw through their trickery and said, Show me a Roman coin whose picture and title are stamped on it. Caesar's, they replied. Well then, he said, give it to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God. So they failed to trap him by what he said in front of the people. Instead, they were amazed by his answer, and they became silent. Discussion about the resurrection. Then Jesus was approached by some Sadducees, religious leaders who say there is no resurrection from the dead. They pose this question: Teacher, Moses gave us a law that if a man dies leaving a wife but no children, his brother should marry the widow and have a child who will carry on the brother's name. Well, suppose there were 7 brothers and the oldest one married and then died without children. So the second brother married the widow, but he also died. And the third brother married her. This continued with all 7 of them who died without children. Finally, the woman also died. So tell us, whose wife will be in the resurrection? For all 7 were married to her. Jesus replied, Marriage is for people here on earth. But in the age to come, those worthy of being raised from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage, and they will never die again. In this respect, they will be like angels. They are children of God and children of the resurrection. But now, as to whether the dead will be raised, even Moses proved this when he wrote about the burning bush. Long after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had died, he referred to the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So he is the God of the living, not the dead, for they are all alive to him. Well said, teacher, remarked some of the teachers of religious law who were standing there, and then no one dared to ask him any more questions. Whose son is the Messiah? Then Jesus presented them with a question. Why is it, he asked, that the Messiah is said to be the Son of God? For David himself wrote the book of Psalms. The Lord said to my Lord, Sit in the place of honor at my right hand, until I humble your enemies, making them a footstool under your feet. Since David called the Messiah Lord, how can the Messiah be his son? Then with the crowds listening, he turned to his disciples and said, Beware of these teachers of religious law, for they like to parade around in flowing robes and love to receive respectful greetings as they walk into the marketplaces. And how they love the seats of honor in the synagogues and the head table at the banquets, yet they shamelessly cheat widows out of their property and then pretend to be pious by making long prayers in public. Because of this, they will be severely punished. And that's the end of chapter 20. I totally agree with that. And you guys all know my stances on televangelists and those preachers at super churches or mega churches or whatever that foolish name they give them. Because I can't stand those people, man. They cheat people out of their money. They cheat the elderly. They cheat the mentally ill. And they cheat the desperate, because these people are desperate for cures. Medical science has pretty much abandoned them, because let's face it, at this time being, there is no publicly acquired cure for cancer or AIDS, and they can't remove tumors that are that are in really hard spaces. And if you're paralyzed and the doctor says they can't do anything about it, and you become desperate, and it's just sickening to see these people get taken advantage of. And that's why they pay I don't know, I remember there was some pastor, or I don't know, reverend, or what I think it was that Joel Olston guy or whatever, but they were saying he charges a ridiculous amount of money for those people that want to be in the front of his tours, I guess. Any preacher or pastor or whatever who goes on the road to preach the gospel shouldn't be charging money. Yeah, okay, I understand, transportation and lodging and food. That's what you should be taking donations for that. Or whatever. You shouldn't be charging $1,000 for a ticket. When does enough become enough? It never does. And that's what he just basically said Jesus said in chapter 20 of Luke. And he said it multiple times already in the Gospels of Matthew and Mark. And it's just one of those things where you just got to shake your head. And this is what it's become. And he pretty much predicted what's going to happen in the world. And you kind of see the fact of the matter when he says, beware of these teachers of religious law, for they like to parade around in flowing robes and to love to receive respectful greetings as they walk in the marketplaces. That could be said about anybody, but it really sticks with me about the televangelists. And you could look look, they shamelessly cheat widows out of the property, and they pretend to be pious by making long prayers in public. You can look at that as what's his name? The televangelist who really hated gay people, but he was caught performing gay acts with another man in an airport bathroom. They're just hypocrites. They're just low life hypocrites, and the more people know this, is the more people will actually understand and not give them their money, and maybe somebody will help the desperate, the elderly, and all this stuff, and be like, no, don't go to that guy's concert where he preaches the Bible. Save that $150 for the back nosebleed section, and go do something else with that money. And I'm finding myself more and more enthralled with the New Testament, and I'm actually really, really enjoying this. I actually really enjoy reading to you people and discussing this stuff with you guys, even though I don't think anybody's listening anymore. But let's finish off today's video with chapter 21, the widow's offering. While Jesus was in the temple, he watched the rich people dropping their gifts in the collection box. Then a poor widow came up and dropped in 2 small coins. I tell you the truth, Jesus said. This poor widow has given more than the rest of them, for they had given a tiny part of their surplus, but she, poor as she is, has given everything she has. Jesus foretells the future. Some of his disciples began talking about the majestic stonework of the temple and the memorial decorations on the wall. But Jesus said, the time is coming when all these things will be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of another. Teacher, they asked, when will this all happen? What sign will show us that these things are about to take place? He replied, don't let anyone mislead you, for many will come in my name claiming I am the Messiah, and saying the time has come, but don't believe them. And when you hear of wars and insurrections, don't panic. Yes, these things must take place first, but the end won't follow immediately. Then he added, nation will go to war against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, and there will be famines and plagues in many lands, and there will be terrifying things and great miraculous signs from heaven. But before all this occurs, there will be a time of great persecution. You will be dragged into synagogues and prisons. You will stand trial before kings and governors because you are my followers. But this will be your opportunity to tell them about me. So don't worry in advance about how to answer the charges against you, for I will give you the right words and such wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to reply or refute you. Even those closest to you, your parents, brothers, relatives, and friends will betray you. They will even kill some of you, and everyone will hate you because you are my followers. But not a hair on your head will perish. By standing firm, you will win your souls. And when you see Jerusalem surrounded by enemies, then you will know that the time of its destruction has arrived. Then those in Judea must flee to the hills. Those in Jerusalem must get out, and those out of the country should not return to the city, for those will be days of God's vengeance, and the prophetic words of the scriptures will be fulfilled. How terrible it would be for pregnant women and for nursing mothers in those days. For there will be a disaster in the land and great anger against the people. They will be killed by the sword or sent away as captives to all the nations of the world. And Jerusalem will be trampled down by the Gentiles until the period of the Gentiles comes to an end. And there will be strange signs in the sun, moon, and stars. And here on earth the nations will be in turmoil, perplexed by the roaring seas and strange tides. People will be terrified at what they see coming upon the earth. For the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then everyone will see the Son of Man coming on a cloud with power and great glory. So when all these things begin to happen, stand and look up, for your salvation is near. Then he gave them this illustration. Notice a fig tree or any other tree. When the leaves come out, you know without being told that summer is near. In the same way, when you see all these things taking place, you can know that the kingdom of God is near. I tell you the truth, this generation will not pass from the scene until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will disappear, but my words will never disappear. Watch out. Don't let your hearts be dulled by carousing in drunkenness and by the worries of this life. Don't let this day catch you unaware like a trap, for that day will come upon everyone living on the earth. Keep alert at all times, and pray that you might be strong enough to escape these things, these coming horrors, and stand before the Son of Man. Every day Jesus went to the temple to teach, and each evening he returned to spend the night on the Mount of Olives. The crowds gathered at the temple early each morning to hear him. That is the end of chapter 21. And, the further I get into reading this with you fine folks is just eye-opening to me. It's just so heartfelt and so warming in the soul to be reading this stuff. And I just honestly like it. It's really turned my life around, I want to say, but I don't want to sound too cornballish, It's the kind of guy I am. So, with that being said, this is actually a really great read. You find so much more, even though it's just retellings, from the other Gospels. But I actually think this is actually getting really good. And every time I read it, it's like I'm going back for another adventure with Jesus at the helm and his disciples and the world around him at the time being such a drastically different place. But with that being said, I want to thank you guys so much for watching and liking these videos and listening. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Please, I'm just trying to spread the word of the Lord, and by spreading the word of the Bible to those who may not have read it yet. So, do yourself a favor and like this video. But anyways, now, it would really just help me out. Like, I'm not doing this for anything else, but just trying to reach other people. So, with that being said, have a wonderful day, you guys. Be good people, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.